I don't know if y'all know this about me. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I grew up with a really tight-knit family. Maybe some of y'all are kind of like this. I grew up with family. You have a meal every Sunday together. Actually, the majority of my family all lived in San Angelo. And so I actually had to rotate grandparents because there was just too many of us. And so we couldn't all go to the same place. And so one Sunday, I would go with my dad's family. And the next Sunday, we would go with my mom's family. And we would do this throughout the year, every Sunday, right? We never missed. And if for some reason we did miss with one grandparent, we just went with the other one, right? You just kind of pull an audible. Family is always so important to me. And so when I was in high school and I began to feel this calling like ministry, Aubrey, when I really felt this calling that ministry is something that I wanted to do, I really kind of got to this point of tension, maybe, because there was a realization that if I wanted to pursue what I thought God was calling me to, it meant that I was going to have to lose what was so important to me. Because family was really everything for me. Ask Haley. Moving for me was difficult. College, even coming here, all of that was just really, really hard to move away from that. But I felt like I had a purpose. I felt like God was putting something in my heart and that he was calling me to something. David's a man that we spent a lot of time looking at. And David was a guy who had a calling, wasn't he? I mean, if you look at the beginning of David's life, we're going to be in 1 Samuel 17 today, but if you look before this, we have a young man who is anointed. He's anointed king. Now, we actually talked about this in our class this morning. I think we often think of David and we think like like little bitty. Most likely David's like a teenager, okay? Think like 15, 16, somewhere in there. And I asked them, what if God called you to lead a church? And they said, no, thank you. David's called to, he's anointed king at this young age. But what's really interesting about David is that he's anointed king, and then you know what he does? He doesn't change anything. Right? He's anointed king, and he keeps taking care of his father's sheep. He keeps going with the things that he knows and the things that he's called to at that moment. David has this huge purpose in his life, right? Massive purpose that's been placed in his life. And yet, what does he do? He decides, you know what? I'm going to wait. So we're going to pick up in 1 Samuel, and this is going to be somewhere around 12. Is 12 what I told you? I'm not going to lie, I don't have it written down. Yeah, 12. There's a lot of story in 1 Samuel 17, and we're going to kind of piece it together because if we read the whole thing, we'd be here too long. So this is verse 12. Now David was the son of an Ephrathite of Bethlehem in Judah named Jesse, who had 8 sons. In the days of Saul, the man was already old and advanced in years. The 3 eldest sons of Jesse had followed Saul to the battle. Now this is the battle with the Philistines, and Goliath is coming out and speaking badly about the Israelites and their God. The names of his 3 sons who went to the battle were Eliab the firstborn, and next Abinadab, and the third Shema. David was the youngest, and the 3 eldest followed Saul. But David went back and forth from Saul to feed his father's sheep in Bethlehem. For 40 days the Philistines came forward and took his stand, morning and evening. And Jesse said to his son David, take for your brothers an ephah of this parched grain and these 10 loaves, and carry them quickly to the camp, to your brothers. Also take these 10 cheeses to the commanders of the 1,000. See how your brothers fare. Bring some token from them. Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. David rose early in the morning, left the sheep with the keeper, took the provisions, and went as Jesse had commanded him. He came to the encampment as the army was going forth to the battle line, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines drew up the battle, army against army. David left the things in charge of the keeper of the baggage, ran to the ranks, and went and greeted his brothers. As he talked with them, the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, came out of the ranks of the Philistines and spoke the same words as before, and David heard them. Now, we've been talking about thriving. It's kind of been our focus. And thriving in a direction is sometimes really difficult. You know, David had this purpose in his life. When I say purpose, he knew what God planned for him, right? He knew what God had planned for him. But David also showed an enormous amount of patience. I mean, huge amount of patience. He waits and he waits. And he doesn't take matters into his own hands. He's waiting for God to move. And then he comes and he's sent by his father. And who is out in the valley but Goliath? You know, and David gets a little curious. He starts kind of asking around like, hey, what happens for the guy who kills Goliath? What do they get? Do y'all remember what he gets? Thank you, Josiah. He does get Goliath. That is good. He gets to be married to Saul's daughter. Now, it's a whole other story about the fact that Saul doesn't do it. But this is what, and so the idea of being the son-in-law of the king, right? Not too bad. Not too bad. If you want to be king, you've got to start getting some recognition and some. See, David knew that God was going to work and that God was going to be faithful. And so he waits, he's patient, but when the opportunity arises, what does he do? He goes, right? He goes. When everyone else is afraid, he goes. And he doesn't go because he's so great, he's so mighty. It's because he knows that this is the moment that God was leading him to. This is the moment where he becomes, I say right after this, he becomes the commander of the armies of Israel, right? This is the moment where eventually, not the daughter he was promised, but he does get married to one of Saul's daughters. It all begins in this moment. Guys, God is faithful when we choose to move in the direction that he's calling us. I think we forget that sometime. We forget that God is faithful. When he calls us, he is going to work and move. We do not have to force things. We do not have to force things. We do not have to make things happen, because do you know who's going to make it happen? God will. God's going to make it happen. You know, if y'all paid attention on Wednesday, didn't have too many adults that participated, kind of hurt my feelings a little bit. I kid. I said, if you're willing, draw what you see when you think of God's deliverance. Right? I would actually encourage you guys, there's a poster on the back side of this divider that y'all can see. A lot of them are the kids and teenagers, a couple of adults. It's interesting to think, when we think of God's deliverance, what do we think of? I saw things like a cross, things like a shield. With the little kids, they say things like parents. And Those are all really good things. But what we see in the story of David, God's deliverance, not only for David, but who is he also delivering? He's delivering the people of Israel, isn't he? It comes because David made the move, right? David trusted. David moved where God was calling him. And there was deliverance. You know, in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 7, this will probably be pretty familiar to you. Yeah, there it is. Ask, and it will be given. Search, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be open for you. For everyone who asks receives. Everyone who searches finds. And for everyone who knocks, the door will be open. Is there any among you who, if your child asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if a child asks for a fish, will give a snake? If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good things to those who ask him? You know, there's not much that we have to do when it comes to God's kingdom. And I don't mean that lightly. I mean, there's a lot we have to do. But really, there's not a lot we have to do. Because God does the work, doesn't he? We just plant seeds. God does the work. He is the one that makes things grow. What it does require from us is to ask, to seek, to knock, to move our feet when God calls us. Seniors, I know you're not up here anymore. Y'all are scattered about. I know that God has a purpose for you in your life. And I hope that you know what it is. But if you don't, be prayerful over that. Be searching for that. And when you figure that out, wait for the moment that he shows you to jump on it. Because he will. He'll open the door. If you trust that God has given you something, given you a purpose, given you a direction, he's going to open that door. Be ready. Because you will be amazed at what God can do. But guys, this is not just for the seniors. And some of y'all, I'm sure, have experienced this in life already. This is what thriving in direction looks like. It's not real complicated. Ask, seek, and knock. And guys, right now, with the season that we're in, we need everyone to jump in wholeheartedly. When you feel purpose, when you see an opportunity arise, when you feel that little tug in your heart that says, oh, maybe I should do this. Chase it. Do something with it. That's God calling you to do something. You know, a couple of months ago, I made a determination, I guess you could call it a New Year's resolution, I don't know, that I was going to be less worried about how things came across. Not that I'm going to try to be offensive, okay? I'm a classic overthinker. Any of those in here? I overthink and overanalyze way too much. And so I'm the person that I would write a text message, read it, and delete it, and then rewrite it, and then delete half of it, and then rewrite it again, and right, y'all know what I'm talking about? You're just trying to get the right words and trying to say it the right way. And so I made the determination, you know what? I'm going to say what comes into my mind. I'm going to say what comes across. And I've been amazed at what God has done through that. I've also made a determination that if I feel like God, got a fly on me. If I feel like God is saying something, or let's say, I just have an encouraging thought for someone. Someone just pops in my mind, and I'm like, man, I'm really thankful that they're doing this. That moment, I stop, and I send a message, right? I let them know. Guys, we all have God speaking into our life, calling us, giving us purpose. The problem is, most of the time we ignore it because it's really easy. And so I want to call you guys to move in the direction that God is calling you. Our church can only thrive when, as a congregation, as a whole, not just the leadership, not staff, everybody moves in the direction that God is calling them in their own lives and in our communal life here. And so we've gone through thriving in the unknown. The fact that it takes courage, right? We're gonna change it up a little bit here, but thriving in the unknown takes courage. Hardship takes grit. Direction takes wisdom and prayer. And so be praying for that. And guys, be praying for that for our seniors. That they have wisdom. Because that is what we need in this world. We need a lot of it. So I told y'all that I'm one that I tend to be kind of family oriented. And as a junior, senior, kind of knowing what I wanted to do and realizing what it meant, that could have been a moment in my life where I decided, you know what, I'm just going to find something else. I'm going to do something else. But in that moment, I decided, when the time came, I kind of took that leap. And to be honest, it was awful. It was not fun. It was not a fun direction to move. It was really difficult for me, and I struggled. And I struggled again when we moved here. It was difficult for me. But guys, I look back and I really think God has blessed me and my family so much because of the decision to move where he was calling us. And I really believe that he called us here. We're really thankful to be here. And I want y'all to believe that God has a purpose for you. So much. I want y'all to believe that. And I want you to do something with it. If you're searching for that purpose, we have men, our leaders in this congregation that'd be more than happy to talk to you. We have a lot of people that'd be thrilled to talk to you about that. Whether that's seeking a relationship with Jesus or just trying to figure out what in the world it means to be part of a church. Because I'm going to tell you guys, it's more than just what we're doing this morning. What we're doing here is good, but it's more than this. If you need prayers, I know we've had so many that are sick, and we've had so many that are hurting from the loss of loved ones. And there's so many things in this world that try to tear us down. If you need prayers, we're here. We want to be praying for you and lifting you up. If you need anything, won't you come while we stand and sing?